Become the person who never quits. Master consistency and transform your life. Published by Limitless Growth Audiobook. Introduction. There is a version of your life that will never exist. It's the life where everything finally lines up before you begin. The one where your energy never fades, your confidence never wavers, your schedule stays perfectly organized, and every day feels like the right day to work toward your goals. It's an appealing story, but it's fiction. If you've been waiting for that version of life to arrive, you've been waiting for a train that was never built. Real change begins somewhere far less glamorous. It begins on an ordinary Tuesday when you don't feel like exercising but do it anyway. It begins when you resist the urge to postpone an important conversation. It begins when you finish one more page, make one more phone call, save one more dollar, or take one more step after your mind has already started negotiating with you to stop. Those moments rarely look important while you're living them, yet they quietly determine the direction of your life. Most people think their future is shaped by big decisions, a new career, a major opportunity, or a lucky break. Those moments matter, but they are surprisingly rare. What shapes your future more often are the tiny decisions that happen when nobody is watching. The choice to continue instead of drift, to return instead of restart, to act instead of explain. This audiobook isn't asking you to become fearless, endlessly motivated, or impossibly disciplined. Those are unrealistic standards that collapse the first time life becomes difficult. Instead, you'll learn something much more durable: how to become the kind of person who keeps moving forward, even when progress is slow, uncertainty is high, and no one is applauding. Think of each chapter as another brick in a foundation. One brick doesn't seem powerful, neither do two, but lay enough of them with care and patience, and eventually you're standing on something strong enough to support a completely different life. As we move forward, you'll challenge beliefs that quietly keep people stuck, replace fragile motivation with dependable action, and discover why consistency isn't a personality trait. It's a series of choices that anyone can learn to make. This isn't a story about becoming perfect. It's about becoming reliable. Reliable enough to keep your word. Reliable enough to face discomfort. Reliable enough to continue when yesterday's excitement is gone. Because the people who change their lives aren't always the smartest, the luckiest, or the most talented. They're the ones who keep taking the next step long after everyone else has stopped counting. Today, that next step is yours. Let's take it together. Chapter 1. Choose commitment before you feel ready. There is a question that quietly shapes almost every decision you make, whether you notice it or not. It isn't, "Can I do this?" or "Do I have enough time?" The question is much simpler. Do I feel ready? For most people, that question becomes an invisible gatekeeper. If the answer is yes, they take action. If the answer is no, they postpone, convincing themselves that tomorrow will somehow bring greater clarity, more confidence, or a stronger desire to begin. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Slowly, the habit of waiting becomes stronger than the habit of acting. The problem isn't a lack of ambition. Most people dream of becoming healthier, more financially secure, more knowledgeable, or more fulfilled. The real obstacle is believing that commitment should come after confidence. In reality, confidence almost always arrives after commitment has already been tested. Think about the first time a child learns to ride a bicycle. They don't begin because they know they won't fall. They begin knowing that falling is almost guaranteed. Wobbling, losing balance, and trying again are not signs that they're failing. They are proof that learning is taking place. Yet as adults, we often expect ourselves to feel certain before taking the first step. Somewhere along the way, we traded curiosity for caution. What if you stopped treating uncertainty as a warning? What if uncertainty simply meant you were standing at the edge of something that could change your life? The people we admire aren't individuals who never experience doubt. They experience it just as often as everyone else. The difference is that they refuse to let doubt make their decisions. They understand that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent leaders. Imagine standing beside a river early in the morning. The surface constantly changes. Small waves appear, disappear, and reform with every passing breeze. If you judged the river by its surface alone, you might think it had no direction. But beneath those ripples, the current continues moving toward the ocean without hesitation. Your emotions are like the surface of the river. They rise and fall throughout the day. Energy comes and goes. Confidence expands and contracts. Enthusiasm appears unexpectedly and disappears just as quickly. Commitment is different. Commitment is the current beneath the surface. It keeps moving regardless of what the surface looks like. Many people mistakenly believe that successful individuals wake up every morning eager to do difficult work. That's an appealing story because it suggests that discipline is a personality trait rather than a practice. Reality is much less glamorous and far more encouraging. The people who consistently move forward often feel the same resistance everyone else feels. They simply stop treating resistance as a reason to quit. Consider someone planting an orchard. On the first day, the land looks almost unchanged. After a week, there is little visible difference. Even after months, the trees are small and fragile. Anyone measuring success by immediate results would likely become discouraged. But the person who planted the orchard understands something important. The purpose of today's work is not today's reward. Today's work is creating a future that cannot exist without today's effort. Your habits work the same way. The workout you complete today will not transform your body overnight. The pages you read today won't instantly make you an expert. The money you save today won't immediately create financial freedom. Yet each action quietly contributes to a future that becomes impossible without these seemingly ordinary choices. This is why commitment matters so much. It frees you from demanding instant proof that your effort is worthwhile. One of the greatest traps in personal growth is confusing movement with preparation. Planning feels productive, research feels responsible, organizing feels like progress. These activities have value, but only if they eventually lead to action. Otherwise, they become comfortable hiding places where nothing is truly at risk. Action asks something different from you. It asks you to accept imperfection. Your first attempt will probably be awkward. Your first routine will likely need adjustment. Your first strategy may not produce the results you expected. None of this means you're on the wrong path. It simply means you've entered the stage where learning becomes real. Imagine an artist staring at a blank canvas. The empty canvas offers unlimited possibilities because nothing has gone wrong yet. But nothing beautiful exists there either. The first brushstroke immediately creates imperfections. It also creates possibility. Every masterpiece begins by sacrificing the illusion of perfection for the reality of progress. Life demands the same exchange. The moment you act, you give yourself permission to improve instead of endlessly preparing. There's another reason commitment changes people from the inside out. Every promise you keep sends a quiet message to your own mind. It says, "You can rely on me." That message is more valuable than it first appears. Many people believe self-confidence comes from praise, achievements, or recognition. While those experiences can help, lasting confidence grows from evidence. Each time you keep a promise, even a small one, you provide evidence that your words and actions are becoming aligned. Over time, that evidence reshapes how you see yourself. Imagine two notebooks. In the first notebook, every page contains promises that were delayed, abandoned, or forgotten. In the second notebook, each page records one small promise that was honored, no matter how ordinary it seemed. Which person would trust themselves more after a year? The difference wouldn't be created by talent. It would be created by accumulated proof. This is why the size of the promise matters less than the consistency behind it. Reading 10 pages every day may seem insignificant. Taking a 20-minute walk may not feel life-changing. Spending 15 focused minutes on an important project might appear too small to matter. But these actions accomplish something deeper than immediate results. They build a relationship with yourself based on reliability instead of intention. And reliability changes everything. When you become someone who follows through, decision-making becomes simpler. You spend less time negotiating with yourself because the answer is already clear. You don't ask whether you feel like honoring your commitment. You honor it because that's who you've become. So here's your challenge. Choose one commitment that is small enough to complete even on your busiest day. Make it specific. Make it realistic. Most importantly, make it non-negotiable. Then repeat it tomorrow and the day after that. Don't chase perfection, chase consistency. Allow each completed action to become another piece of evidence that you're capable of keeping your word. One day, you'll look back and realize your life didn't change because of one extraordinary decision. It changed because ordinary decisions stopped depending on extraordinary feelings. That is where lasting transformation begins. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to turn this commitment into a system of habits that continues working for you, even on the days when motivation quietly disappears. Chapter 2. Build habits that carry you forward. A commitment is a promise. A habit is that promise put on autopilot. In the previous chapter, you made an important shift. Instead of waiting to feel ready, you learn to act despite uncertainty. But commitment alone has a weakness. It demands your attention every day. Each morning, it asks the same question: will you keep your word today? If every action depends on making that decision from scratch, sooner or later, your energy begins to wear thin. This is where habits quietly change everything. Think about how you lock your front door or brush your teeth. You probably don't pause to debate whether those actions are worthwhile. You simply do them, not because you're highly motivated, but because repetition has turned them into part of your daily rhythm. They no longer compete for your attention. Imagine if your most important goals worked the same way. Many people believe successful lives are built through dramatic effort, intense bursts of productivity, perfect mornings, or heroic discipline. Those moments can feel exciting, but they rarely last. Real transformation is usually much quieter. It happens when useful behaviors become so familiar that they require less emotional effort to begin. Picture a narrow path cutting through a field. The first person to cross it has to push through tall grass. The second has a slightly easier walk. After hundreds of people follow the same route, the path becomes obvious. Walking there no longer requires thought because the route has been established. Your brain works in much the same way. Every repeated action creates a mental path. At first, it feels awkward because you're carving a new direction. The mind naturally resists unfamiliar routines because they require attention and energy. But repetition changes the landscape. What once felt difficult slowly becomes expected. Eventually, not doing the habit feels stranger than doing it. This is why the beginning matters so much. Many people fail because they design habits for the person they wish they already were, instead of the person they are today. They promise to exercise for 90 minutes every morning, read 50 pages every night, meditate for an hour, and completely reorganize their lives by the end of the week. The plan looks impressive on paper, but it collapses under the weight of reality. The wiser approach is surprisingly modest. Build habits that can survive your worst days, not just your best ones. Anyone can maintain a routine when life feels organized, energy is high, and nothing unexpected happens. The real test arrives on stressful days when work runs late, your schedule changes without warning, or your enthusiasm disappears. If your habit can survive those moments, it has a chance to become permanent. Think of a bridge designed to withstand ordinary traffic. It might look impressive, but if it collapses during the first major storm, it was never truly reliable. Strong bridges are built with difficult conditions in mind. Your habits deserve the same kind of engineering. Instead of asking, "What's the fastest way to improve?" ask, "What's the smallest action I can repeat without breaking?" That question changes everything. A person who writes one thoughtful page every day will eventually create something substantial. A person who walks 20 minutes most days will cover remarkable distance over time. A person who consistently saves a small amount develops not only financial progress, but also the identity of someone who prepares for the future. Notice the pattern. The visible results matter, but the invisible transformation matters even more. Every repeated action casts a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Skip a habit once, and you've simply missed a day. Repeat the habit consistently, and you're quietly reshaping your identity. That's why habits should never be measured only by what they produce. They should also be measured by who they encourage you to become. There's another misunderstanding worth challenging. People often think consistency means never missing a day. Real life doesn't work that way. You'll get sick, you'll travel, unexpected responsibilities will appear. Some days simply won't unfold according to plan. The danger isn't missing once. The danger is allowing one missed day to become a new pattern. Imagine a musician practicing scales. Missing one rehearsal won't erase years of progress. But deciding that one missed rehearsal means there's no point continuing, that's where momentum disappears. Progress isn't lost in isolated moments. It's lost when temporary interruptions become permanent excuses. A simple rule can protect you from this trap. Never miss twice. If today didn't go as planned, return tomorrow. Don't waste energy criticizing yourself. Don't create dramatic stories about losing discipline. Simply step back onto the path before the grass begins to grow over it again. Another helpful way to strengthen habits is to connect them to something that already exists in your day. Instead of relying on memory or inspiration, let one routine naturally lead to another. After you make your morning coffee, read a few pages. After dinner, spend a few minutes reviewing your goals. After brushing your teeth, prepare tomorrow's priorities. The less your habits depend on perfect timing, the more likely they are to endure. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The effort required to start decreases. The internal debate becomes quieter. What once demanded willpower now feels like part of your normal life. That's the hidden reward of repetition. It doesn't just make tasks easier, it changes what feels natural. And when the right actions become natural, consistency stops feeling like a constant battle. In the next chapter, you'll discover the deepest transformation of all, not changing what you do, but changing who you believe yourself to be. Because lasting consistency isn't ultimately built on habits alone. It's built on identity. Chapter 3. Become the person who keeps promises to yourself. By now, you've made two important discoveries. First, waiting to feel ready is a habit that quietly steals opportunity. Second, lasting progress depends less on dramatic effort and more on steady routines that can survive ordinary life. But there's one question still waiting to be answered. Why do some people stay consistent for years while others constantly start over? The answer has less to do with what they do and far more to do with who they believe they are. Most people build their lives from the outside in. They begin with goals. I want to lose weight. I want to start a business. I want to become financially secure. These are worthwhile ambitions, but they all share a hidden weakness. Goals focus on reaching a destination. Identity focuses on becoming a different person. That difference changes everything. Imagine two neighbors who are both invited to an early morning walk. One says, "I can't today, I'm trying to exercise more." The other says, "I'll be there, I'm someone who doesn't skip mornings." Both may complete the same walk, but listen closely to the language. One person is attempting a behavior, the other is expressing an identity. When challenges appear, identity is usually stronger than intention because people naturally protect the story they tell themselves about who they are. Whether you realize it or not, you are always living according to an internal story. Perhaps you've said things like, "I've never been disciplined," "I'm terrible at finishing projects," or "I'm just not consistent." Those statements may feel harmless, but the mind has an interesting habit. It looks for evidence that supports the identity you've accepted. If you believe you're someone who always gives up, every missed workout, unfinished task, or delayed decision seems to confirm that belief. Eventually, the identity feels like reality. But identities are rarely fixed. More often, they are accumulated conclusions drawn from repeated experiences. Picture a sculptor standing before a block of stone. At first glance, the stone seems solid and unchangeable, yet with each careful strike, its shape begins to evolve. No single movement creates the final sculpture. Thousands of small adjustments do. Your identity changes in much the same way. Every action is another small strike against the old version of yourself. Every promise you keep reshapes the story you tell yourself. The process isn't dramatic enough to notice in a single day, but over months and years, it becomes impossible to ignore. This is why small victories matter so much. Suppose you decide to read for 15 minutes each evening. On the surface, you're building knowledge. Underneath the surface, you're building something even more valuable. Each completed session whispers the same message: "I'm someone who follows through." That message grows stronger with repetition. Eventually, the action itself becomes less important than the identity it reinforces. Think about a lighthouse standing on a rocky coastline. Storms come and go. Waves crash against the shore. Thick fog sometimes hides the horizon completely. Yet the lighthouse doesn't chase every wave or react to every shift in the weather. Its purpose remains unchanged because its foundation is secure. Identity works the same way. When your sense of self is rooted in commitment rather than emotion, temporary setbacks lose much of their power. A difficult week doesn't convince you that you're a failure. Missing one day doesn't erase months of consistency. Criticism doesn't immediately shake your confidence. You adjust, recover, and continue because your foundation isn't built on perfect performance. It's built on repeated proof that you can be trusted. This perspective also changes how you respond to mistakes. Many people treat failure like a verdict. One setback becomes evidence that they were never capable in the first place. But imagine a builder constructing a stone wall. Occasionally, one stone doesn't fit correctly. The builder doesn't demolish the entire wall because of a single misplaced piece. They simply adjust it and keep building. Your personal growth deserves the same patience. A missed habit is not a broken identity. A difficult month is not a failed future. One wrong decision does not erase hundreds of right ones. The real danger isn't making mistakes. The real danger is allowing mistakes to define who you believe you are. Here's a simple exercise that can quietly reshape your thinking. Instead of asking yourself, "What do I want to achieve?" begin asking, "What kind of person would naturally achieve that?" If you want better health, what choices would a healthy person make today? If you want financial stability, how would a financially responsible person handle today's spending decisions? If you want to become a writer, what would a writer do before going to bed tonight? Notice that these questions don't require perfection, they require alignment. When your actions begin matching the person you want to become, even in small ways, your identity starts changing from the inside out. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. You stop relying on motivation because your behavior no longer feels like a temporary challenge. It feels like an honest reflection of who you are. You don't exercise because you're forcing yourself. You exercise because that's what someone like you does. You don't finish important work because you're chasing discipline. You finish it because keeping your word has become part of your character. This is the quiet turning point where consistency becomes less of a struggle and more of a standard. You are no longer acting like someone who refuses to quit. You are becoming that person. In the next chapter, we'll confront one of the greatest obstacles to that identity: procrastination. You'll discover why putting things off has very little to do with laziness, and how taking action before you feel prepared can permanently weaken its hold on your life. Chapter 4. Defeat procrastination before it defeats you. Procrastination rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock on the door and say, "I'm here to keep you from becoming the person you want to be." Instead, it arrives wearing far more convincing disguises. It tells you to wait until you're better prepared. It suggests you should do a little more research. It encourages you to organize your workspace, answer a few messages, or tackle something easier first. Every excuse sounds reasonable, and that's exactly what makes procrastination so dangerous. Most people think procrastination is a problem of time management. It isn't. If it were, having a planner would solve it. Deadlines would never be missed, and important dreams wouldn't sit untouched for years. The real struggle is rarely about time. It's about discomfort. Human beings naturally move toward what feels familiar and away from what feels uncertain. Whenever a task carries the possibility of failure, criticism, embarrassment, or disappointment, the mind searches for an escape. Sometimes that escape is scrolling through a phone. Sometimes it's cleaning the house. Sometimes it's convincing yourself that tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow becomes a remarkably comfortable hiding place. Imagine standing beside a cold lake on an early morning. You know the water will feel uncomfortable for the first few moments, so you tell yourself you'll jump in after another minute, then another. The water never becomes warmer because you're waiting. The only thing that changes is the amount of time you've spent avoiding the inevitable. Important work often feels exactly the same. The conversation you've been avoiding won't become easier simply because another week passes. The business idea won't grow while it stays inside your notebook. The book won't write itself because you spent another month thinking about the perfect opening sentence. Delay creates the illusion of safety, but it quietly increases the weight of the task you're avoiding. The longer something sits unfinished, the larger it begins to appear in your mind. Think about carrying a small backpack. If you wear it for a few minutes, you barely notice its weight. Carry it every day without putting it down, and eventually it begins to feel heavier than it actually is. Unfinished decisions work the same way. They occupy mental space. They drain attention. They quietly whisper in the background of every day, reminding you of promises you've postponed. Many people mistake this growing pressure as evidence that the task has become more difficult. In reality, the task is often exactly the same. What's changed is the emotional burden attached to it. Here's another truth that deserves attention. Procrastination isn't always caused by laziness. More often, it's caused by perfectionism. Perfectionism sounds admirable because it appears to have high standards, but beneath the surface, it often hides fear. Fear of producing work that isn't good enough, fear of making mistakes, fear of discovering that your best effort might still fall short. So instead of risking an imperfect result, you protect yourself by delaying the attempt altogether. Imagine a potter standing beside a wheel with a lump of clay. If the clay remains untouched, it can never become a beautiful vase, but it also can never become a flawed one. The untouched clay preserves the illusion of perfection because it has never been tested. Many people treat their dreams the same way. They protect potential by refusing to put it into motion, but potential has no value until it meets action. A rough first draft can be improved, a slow beginning can become momentum, a weak attempt can become experience. An untouched dream remains exactly where it started. This is why the most effective response to procrastination is surprisingly simple. Reduce the distance between thinking and doing. The moment you notice yourself negotiating with a task, begin it before the negotiation grows stronger. Don't promise to finish everything. Promise to begin. Open the document. Put on your shoes. Make the phone call. Write one sentence. Read one page. Action has a remarkable ability to quiet the mind's resistance. Have you ever noticed how difficult it feels to start cleaning a cluttered room, yet once you begin, continuing becomes easier? The first 5 minutes often require more effort than the next 30. That's because starting breaks the spell of hesitation. Motion creates clarity. Waiting rarely does. There's another trap worth recognizing. Many people believe they need to eliminate fear before taking action. The opposite is usually true. Action is what gradually reduces fear. Picture someone learning to swim. Reading books about swimming may increase knowledge, but it doesn't replace the experience of entering the water. Confidence grows through participation, not observation. Every meaningful skill follows this pattern. You become comfortable speaking by speaking. You become better at writing by writing. You become more resilient by facing situations that test your resilience. Avoidance promises relief, but only action creates growth. As you've probably noticed by now, every chapter in this audiobook builds on the one before it. In the beginning, you learned to stop waiting until you felt ready. Then you built habits capable of surviving ordinary life. After that, you began reshaping your identity into someone who keeps promises. Now those lessons come together in a practical way. When procrastination appears, don't argue with it. Don't waste energy trying to eliminate every doubt or manufacture the perfect emotional state. Return to your identity. Ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" Ask, "What would the person I'm becoming do next?" That question shifts your attention away from temporary emotions and back toward long-term character. Character is built one decision at a time, not the dramatic decisions that everyone notices, the quiet ones, the decision to begin, the decision to continue, the decision to return after missing a day, the decision to keep your word when nobody else is watching. These moments may seem too small to matter, but they quietly shape every meaningful achievement. Here's a practical exercise to carry with you after this chapter. Choose one important task you've been postponing. Don't aim to complete it today. Instead, remove every unnecessary barrier between you and the first meaningful action. If you need to write, open the document now. If you need to exercise, lay out your shoes before going to bed. If you need to have a difficult conversation, write the first sentence you want to say. Your goal is not to finish. Your goal is to make starting almost unavoidable. Because once movement begins, momentum has a chance to take over. And momentum is one of the greatest enemies procrastination will ever face. In the next chapter, you'll discover why discomfort is not something to escape, but something to train for. You'll learn that the people who refuse to quit aren't those who avoid difficult moments. They're the ones who gradually become at home within them. Chapter 5. Step into discomfort and stay there long enough to grow. Every life is shaped by a series of choices, but beneath those choices lies something even more influential: what you are willing to tolerate. Some people tolerate temporary discomfort because they value long-term growth. Others tolerate long-term regret because they spend their lives avoiding temporary discomfort. The difference between those two paths rarely appears dramatic in a single day, but over the course of years, it becomes impossible to ignore. Take a moment to think about the last time you delayed something important. Perhaps it was a difficult conversation, a challenging project, or a personal goal you promised yourself you would begin. In that moment, avoiding the task probably felt like relief. Yet, what happened afterward? The problem remained. In many cases, it grew larger. What seemed like an escape was simply a trade, short-term comfort exchanged for long-term pressure. That is one of the oldest bargains the human mind continues to make. Our brains are remarkably efficient at protecting us from discomfort. Thousands of years ago, this instinct helped people survive genuine danger. Today, however, that same protective system often reacts to ordinary challenges as though they are threats. An uncomfortable presentation feels like danger. A difficult workout feels like danger. Starting a business, asking for feedback, admitting a mistake, or trying something unfamiliar can trigger the same instinct. Avoid it. The mind isn't always trying to help you succeed. Sometimes it's simply trying to help you stay comfortable. But comfort and growth rarely occupy the same space. Imagine a blacksmith placing a piece of steel into a blazing furnace. To an outside observer, the heat appears destructive. The metal glows, softens, and bends under repeated strikes of the hammer. Yet the blacksmith understands something the observer does not. The fire is not destroying the steel. It is making transformation possible. People experience growth in much the same way. The difficult conversation strengthens communication. The challenging workout strengthens the body. Honest self-reflection strengthens character. Repeated practice strengthens skill. Every meaningful improvement asks you to spend time where things feel uncertain, awkward, or demanding. Discomfort is not evidence that something is wrong. Very often, it is evidence that something is changing. Unfortunately, many people interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. The moment learning becomes frustrating, they assume they lack talent. The moment progress slows, they question whether the goal is worth pursuing. The moment criticism appears, they begin doubting themselves instead of examining the lesson hidden inside it. Imagine planting a seed beneath the ground. For days, nothing visible happens. If you judged the process only by what you could see, you might conclude the seed had failed. Yet beneath the surface, roots are quietly expanding into the soil. Growth begins where no one can see it. Personal development follows the same pattern. There will be seasons when your effort produces no obvious reward. You continue showing up, but the results remain hidden. During those moments, discomfort takes a new form. It is no longer the discomfort of hard work. It becomes the discomfort of uncertainty. This is where many people quit, not because the work became impossible, but because they expected visible proof before invisible growth had finished taking place. The people who continue are not blessed with extraordinary patience. They've simply learned to trust that meaningful change often happens before measurable results appear. Another misconception deserves attention. Many believe courage means feeling fearless. In reality, courage often feels surprisingly ordinary. It looks like speaking even when your voice isn't perfectly steady. It looks like submitting work before you're completely satisfied. It looks like admitting you don't know something and choosing to learn instead of pretending. It looks like returning after failure without demanding guarantees that this time everything will work out. Fear may still be present. Courage simply refuses to let fear make the final decision. Think about someone learning to play the piano. At first, every movement requires concentration. Mistakes happen constantly. Simple melodies sound awkward and uneven. If comfort were the goal, the person would stop after the first lesson. But with enough repetition, the uncomfortable gradually becomes familiar. Fingers begin moving naturally. Confidence quietly replaces hesitation. Notice what changed. The piano didn't become easier, the player became stronger. That distinction matters. Many people spend years hoping life will become less demanding. They wait for easier circumstances, fewer responsibilities, or perfect conditions. Yet the greatest transformation occurs when you stop asking life to become easier and begin becoming more capable yourself. Strength changes your relationship with difficulty. Imagine carrying a heavy bucket of water every morning. The bucket weighs exactly the same each day, yet after months of carrying it, what once felt exhausting begins to feel manageable. The challenge didn't shrink. Your capacity expanded. This is one of the most encouraging truths you'll encounter. You don't need every obstacle to disappear. You need to become the kind of person who can carry more without losing direction. That process happens gradually. Each difficult decision strengthens your judgment. Each completed promise strengthens your integrity. Each setback strengthens your resilience. Each uncomfortable moment you refuse to avoid quietly increases your confidence, not because life becomes predictable, but because you've proven you can handle uncertainty. There's a simple practice that can help you build this mindset. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. What discomfort did I willingly face today? Maybe you had an honest conversation you had been avoiding. Maybe you finished an important task instead of distracting yourself. Maybe you admitted a mistake instead of defending it. Maybe you stayed focused for another 20 minutes when quitting felt easier. These moments deserve more attention than the outcome itself because they reveal the direction your character is moving. Over time, you'll notice an interesting shift. The things that once intimidated you begin to lose their power. Not because they've become smaller, because you've become larger. The version of you who once hesitated at every difficult step slowly gives way to someone who understands that discomfort is not an enemy to defeat. It is a training ground. It is where discipline is tested, confidence is earned, and identity is strengthened. And perhaps most importantly, it is where the habit of quitting begins to disappear. The person who never quits is not someone who avoids difficult moments. They are someone who has learned to remain steady inside them. In the next chapter, we'll take that idea even further. You'll discover how real self-discipline isn't built through rigid self-control or constant willpower. Instead, it grows through intentional systems, deliberate choices, and daily standards that make consistency possible even when life becomes unpredictable. Chapter 6. Build discipline that doesn't depend on willpower. By this point, you've begun to see a pattern. Commitment starts the process. Habits keep it moving. Identity gives it meaning. Learning to face discomfort strengthens your resolve. Now comes the question that quietly determines whether all of those lessons survive the demands of everyday life. What happens on the days when you simply don't have the energy? Everyone has those days. You sleep poorly, work drains your attention, plans change without warning. Small frustrations pile on top of each other until even simple tasks feel unusually difficult. In moments like these, many people assume they need stronger willpower, but relying on willpower alone is like trying to power an entire city with a single battery. It may work for a while, but eventually it runs out. Discipline is often misunderstood because it is associated with forcing yourself through constant struggle. In reality, the strongest form of discipline is quiet. It removes unnecessary decisions before they become daily battles. Imagine a pilot preparing for a long flight. The pilot doesn't wait until the aircraft is in the middle of a storm to begin checking instruments. The preparation happens before takeoff. Flight paths are reviewed, systems are tested, and backup procedures are put in place. Those routines don't eliminate turbulence, but they make it far less likely that a difficult moment will become a disaster. Your daily life deserves the same kind of preparation. If every healthy choice depends on making the perfect decision in the middle of a stressful day, stress will eventually win. Instead, build your environment so that the right decision becomes the easiest one. Prepare tomorrow's priorities before going to sleep. Keep distractions out of reach when it's time to focus. Decide in advance when you'll exercise, read, or work on meaningful projects. Every decision made ahead of time is one less negotiation with yourself later. Think of discipline less as an act of force and more as an act of design. A river doesn't reach the ocean because it pushes harder every day. It flows because the landscape gives it direction. Your routines create that landscape. When your days have structure, your energy is spent on meaningful work instead of endless decision-making. There's another important shift to make. Stop measuring discipline by intensity. Measure it by reliability. A person who exercises for 2 hours once a week may appear more committed than someone who walks for 30 minutes every morning. But over time, reliability almost always outperforms intensity. Consistency creates trust, and trust creates momentum. This is why your standards should be realistic enough to survive ordinary life. If your system only works on perfect days, it isn't really a system. The routines that transform people are the ones that continue through busy weeks, unexpected setbacks, and changing circumstances. Another helpful practice is learning to separate your mood from your responsibilities. Your emotions deserve to be acknowledged, but they don't need to become instructions. You can feel tired and still honor a commitment. You can feel uncertain and still take the next step. Discipline isn't pretending those emotions don't exist. It's refusing to give them complete authority over your actions. Each time you do this, you strengthen something deeper than productivity. You strengthen self-respect. You prove, once again, that your choices are guided by values rather than temporary feelings. So, here's a challenge for today. Instead of asking yourself how to become more disciplined, ask a different question. What system can I build that makes discipline easier tomorrow than it is today? Small adjustments made consistently will always outperform heroic effort that cannot be sustained. The goal isn't to become someone who never feels resistance. The goal is to become someone whose routines are strong enough to keep moving even when resistance appears. Because lasting discipline isn't built on endless willpower. It's built on thoughtful preparation, dependable systems, and the quiet decision to keep showing up one ordinary day at a time. In the next chapter, you'll discover how setbacks can become one of your greatest advantages and why the people who achieve lasting success don't avoid failure, they learn how to use it. Chapter 7. Turn setbacks into your strongest advantage. Sooner or later, something will interrupt your progress. The routine you've worked hard to build will be disrupted. A plan will fail. An opportunity you've counted on may disappear. You'll make a mistake that leaves you questioning your judgment. There will be moments when it feels as though everything you've built is beginning to unravel. When those moments arrive, remember this. A setback is an event. Quitting is a decision. The two are not the same. Many people connect their confidence to constant progress. As long as life moves in the right direction, they feel capable. But the moment things go wrong, they begin doubting themselves instead of examining the situation. They don't simply experience failure, they become convinced that failure describes who they are. That way of thinking quietly steals more dreams than failure ever could. Imagine a sailor crossing the open ocean. No captain expects calm water every day. Strong winds, rough waves, and unexpected storms are accepted as part of the voyage. The sailor doesn't waste precious energy complaining that the sea should have been easier. Instead, attention shifts to something far more useful, adjusting the sails. The destination remains the same, only the approach changes. Life rewards the same mindset. You cannot control every obstacle, every delay, or every disappointment, but you can always influence your response. And in the long run, your response shapes your future far more than the obstacle itself. Think back to a time when something didn't go according to plan. Perhaps you failed an important exam, lost a job, abandoned a goal, or watched months of effort produce disappointing results. At the time, it may have felt like the end of the story. Looking back now, you may notice something different. That experience probably taught you lessons comfort never could. It forced you to adapt, rethink your assumptions, or develop strengths you didn't know you needed. Growth has an unusual habit. It often arrives wearing the clothes of disappointment. Consider a potter shaping clay on a spinning wheel. The clay doesn't become useful because every movement is perfect. Again and again, the potter presses, adjusts, reshapes, and occasionally starts over. Every correction brings the final form into clearer focus. If the clay could speak, it might mistake those adjustments for failure. The potter knows they're simply part of the process. Your setbacks serve a similar purpose. They reveal weak assumptions, expose fragile habits, and highlight areas that still need attention. Without them, improvement would slow because you would have no reason to examine what isn't working. This doesn't mean you should enjoy failure or seek unnecessary hardship. It means you should stop treating setbacks as permanent verdicts. They are information, not identity. One helpful practice is to replace the question, "Why did this happen to me?" with a more useful one, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" That single shift changes your role. Instead of becoming the victim of the situation, you become its student. Students remain curious. Victims remain stuck. Curiosity creates movement because it keeps searching for better answers. Another mistake people make after failure is believing they must immediately recover all the progress they've lost. They push too hard, expect too much, and become discouraged when they can't instantly return to where they were. Nature offers a wiser example. After a forest fire, new life doesn't appear overnight. First, the soil begins healing, small plants emerge. Over time, stronger roots take hold, and eventually an entire ecosystem returns. Recovery follows its own rhythm. Your personal setbacks deserve the same patience. If you've fallen behind, don't demand perfection from your next step. Simply take the next useful step, then another. Momentum isn't rebuilt through dramatic effort, it's rebuilt through repeated action. Remember everything you've learned so far. Commitment teaches you to begin. Habits teach you to continue. Identity reminds you who you're becoming. Discomfort teaches you to stay when things are difficult. Discipline keeps you moving even when motivation disappears. Now setbacks teach you something equally valuable. Progress is rarely a straight line. It bends, it slows. Sometimes it even feels like it's moving backward. But none of those moments have the authority to define your future unless you allow them to become your final chapter. Every obstacle asks the same quiet question: will this experience stop you, or will it shape you? The answer is never found in the setback itself. It is found in the choice you make after it. Choose to learn. Choose to adapt. Choose to begin again without carrying unnecessary shame from yesterday. Because the people who never quit are not those who avoid failure. They are the ones who become increasingly difficult to defeat because every setback leaves them wiser than before. In the next chapter, you'll discover how to protect your most valuable resource, your attention, and why mastering your focus may be the difference between living by intention and living by distraction. Chapter 8. Guard your focus. Like your future depends on it. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with water while a dozen small holes are leaking from the bottom. You can pour faster, you can work harder, you can carry more water, but until the leaks are repaired, the bucket will never stay full. For many people, this is exactly how life feels. They aren't lacking ambition. They aren't afraid of effort. They're simply losing their attention in so many directions that very little of it reaches the work that matters most. Attention is one of the few resources that can never be replaced. You can earn back money. You can rebuild strength after illness. You can recover from mistakes. But an hour spent on something that adds no value to your life is an hour that will never return. Every day your attention is quietly deciding the shape of your future, whether you realize it or not. Most people think focus is the ability to concentrate harder. In reality, focus begins with deciding what deserves your concentration in the first place. Imagine an archer preparing to hit a distant target. Before drawing the bow, the archer ignores everything that isn't the target. The wind is noticed but not obsessed over. The crowd becomes background noise. Every unnecessary distraction fades because the destination is clear. Your life works the same way. When your priorities are uncertain, everything begins to feel equally important. Every notification demands an immediate response. Every new idea seems worth chasing. Every interruption feels harmless because it only takes a few moments. Yet dozens of small interruptions can quietly consume an entire day without leaving behind anything meaningful. Distraction is rarely dramatic. It doesn't usually steal an entire afternoon all at once. It steals 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, a quick glance at your phone, an unnecessary conversation, another task that suddenly feels more urgent than the one that actually matters. By the end of the day, you've been busy almost every hour, yet strangely dissatisfied because the work that mattered most remains unfinished. This is why protecting your focus requires more than determination. It requires boundaries. Think about a gardener tending a young tree. The gardener doesn't simply water the tree and hope for the best. A fence may be built around it to keep animals away. Weeds are removed before they compete for nutrients. Broken branches are trimmed so healthy ones can grow stronger. Growth requires protection. Your attention deserves the same care. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every request deserves an immediate response. Not every opportunity deserves your time. One of the quietest forms of maturity is learning to say no to good opportunities so you can say yes to the ones that truly matter. This can feel uncomfortable at first because saying no often creates temporary disappointment. But constantly saying yes creates something far more damaging. It divides your energy into pieces too small to produce meaningful results anywhere. Imagine trying to light a campfire using sunlight. If the sunlight spreads across the entire ground, nothing happens. But place a magnifying glass over a single point, and the concentrated light becomes powerful enough to create fire. Your attention behaves in exactly the same way. Scattered effort creates scattered results. Concentrated effort creates momentum. Another challenge worth recognizing is mental clutter. Many people carry unfinished decisions from one day into the next. Bills that need to be paid, conversations waiting to happen, goals that have never been clearly defined, small promises left incomplete. Individually, these may seem insignificant. Together, they become background noise that quietly competes for your attention. Imagine walking through a room where dozens of radios are playing at the same time. Even if each radio is turned down low, your mind eventually becomes exhausted trying to process them all. Mental clutter works no differently. One way to reduce this noise is to give unfinished thoughts a home outside your mind. Write them down. Keep a notebook nearby. Create tomorrow's priorities before today ends. When your mind no longer has to remember everything, it becomes free to fully engage with what you're doing right now. There's another misconception that deserves attention. Many people believe multitasking is a valuable skill. More often than not, it is simply rapid switching between tasks. Imagine reading a novel while someone interrupts you every 2 minutes and asks you to begin reading a different book. Eventually, you may finish all of them, but you'll understand none of them deeply. Every interruption forces your mind to find its place again. Meaningful work requires immersion. Depth cannot be rushed. Whether you're learning a skill, solving a difficult problem, building a business, or strengthening a relationship, your best thinking emerges after you've remained with the task long enough for distractions to fade into the background. This is why moments of uninterrupted focus are becoming increasingly valuable. In a world constantly competing for your attention, the ability to remain present has become a rare advantage. Protect it. Schedule time when your phone is out of reach. Work on one meaningful task before checking messages. Allow silence to become something you welcome rather than avoid. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. You may even notice an urge to reach for distraction the moment a task becomes difficult. Don't judge yourself for it. Simply notice the impulse without obeying it. Like every habit you've developed throughout this audiobook, focus grows stronger through repetition. The more often you return your attention to what matters, the easier that return becomes. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop measuring your days by how busy they felt. You begin measuring them by whether your attention was invested wisely. That shift changes more than productivity. It changes the quality of your life, because where your attention goes, your character quietly follows. If your attention is constantly borrowed by distractions, your potential remains scattered. But when your attention consistently returns to meaningful work, your future begins taking shape one focused hour at a time. You've now learned how to begin with commitment, strengthen your habits, reshape your identity, overcome procrastination, embrace discomfort, build discipline, recover from setbacks, and protect your focus. The next step is perhaps the most challenging of all. You'll discover how to stop surrendering your power to excuses and start taking complete ownership of your choices. Because the moment you accept responsibility for your direction, you also reclaim the ability to change it. Chapter 9. Take ownership of the life you're creating. There is a quiet moment that separates people who remain stuck from those who begin transforming their lives. It is not the moment they discover a better strategy or uncover a secret to success. It is the moment they stop asking, "Whose fault is this?" and begin asking, "What can I do next?" That single shift changes everything. Blame has an unusual appeal because it offers immediate emotional relief. If circumstances, other people, bad luck, or difficult timing are responsible for every setback, then you don't have to carry the weight of responsibility. For a brief moment, that can feel comforting, but comfort comes at a hidden price. The moment you hand responsibility to something outside yourself, you also hand away your ability to influence the outcome. Imagine sitting in the passenger seat of a car. You may have strong opinions about the direction it's traveling, but unless you're willing to take the driver's seat, your influence remains limited. Many people approach life the same way. They spend years criticizing the road, the weather, or the traffic, while forgetting that meaningful progress begins the moment they choose to take hold of the steering wheel. Taking ownership doesn't mean pretending life is always fair. It isn't. Some people begin with advantages others never receive. Unexpected hardships appear without warning. Opportunities are distributed unevenly. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will sometimes work against you despite your best efforts. Acknowledging those realities is honest. Allowing them to permanently define your future is a different choice altogether. Imagine two gardeners receiving identical packets of seeds. One spends the entire season complaining about the rocky soil, the changing weather, and the insects that damaged several plants. The other notices the same problems, but begins removing stones, improving the soil, and protecting the young plants from future damage. Neither gardener controls the weather. Only one controls the response. Months later, their gardens look remarkably different, not because one had fewer problems, because one accepted the responsibility to work with the conditions instead of waiting for perfect ones. Life follows the same principle. Ownership is not about controlling everything. It is about taking responsibility for everything you can control. Your effort, your attitude, your preparation, your willingness to learn, your response after disappointment. These are powerful forms of influence, yet they are often overlooked because they lack the drama of blaming something else. There's another subtle way excuses appear. Sometimes they don't sound like excuses at all. They sound like permanent identities. I'm just not organized. I've never been good with money. I'm too old to start over. I'm not naturally disciplined. At first glance, these statements appear to describe reality. More often, they describe conclusions that have been repeated so often they begin to feel unquestionable. But every conclusion deserves to be challenged. Imagine an actor performing the same role for years. Eventually, the lines become so familiar that they no longer require thought. The performance feels natural, even though it began as something learned. Many limiting beliefs work exactly the same way. You've repeated them often enough that they've become part of your internal dialogue. The encouraging news is that what has been learned can also be replaced, not by pretending every challenge disappears, but by refusing to let yesterday's description become tomorrow's identity. Ownership begins with language. Instead of saying, I have to, try asking, I choose to. That small change may seem insignificant, but it reminds you that many of your daily actions are decisions rather than obligations. You choose how to spend your evening. You choose whether to keep your promises. You choose whether to learn from criticism or defend yourself against it. Even when circumstances limit your options, there is almost always a choice in how you respond, and response is where character quietly reveals itself. Think of a skilled carpenter working with imperfect wood. Some boards are slightly warped, others contain knots or uneven grain. An inexperienced carpenter might complain that nothing useful can be built. A skilled one studies each piece, adjusts the design where necessary, and continues working. The quality of the finished table depends less on perfect materials than on the wisdom of the person shaping them. Your life is no different. You may not have chosen every circumstance you've faced, but you are shaping what those circumstances become. Another powerful habit is learning to replace explanation with action. It's natural to explain why something didn't happen. You were busy, you felt overwhelmed, unexpected problems appeared. Sometimes those explanations are completely true. The question is whether they move your life forward. Imagine carrying a heavy stone in your backpack. Every time someone asks why you're walking slowly, you explain how heavy the stone is. Your explanation may be accurate, but it doesn't make the journey easier. At some point, progress requires setting the stone down rather than describing its weight. Action has a remarkable ability to solve problems that endless explanation never will. This doesn't mean becoming harsh with yourself. Ownership is not self-punishment, it is self-leadership. A good leader doesn't ignore mistakes, but neither do they become trapped by them. They examine what happened, adjust the plan, and continue moving. Lead yourself the same way. Speak to yourself honestly. Accept responsibility without carrying unnecessary guilt. Learn without condemning yourself. Correct your course without questioning your worth. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress guided by accountability. As you've moved through this audiobook, you've built one principle upon another. You committed before you felt ready. You created habits instead of relying on motivation. You reshaped your identity through consistent action. You defeated procrastination by learning to begin. You embraced discomfort instead of avoiding it. You built systems stronger than willpower. You turned setbacks into teachers. You protected your focus from distraction. Now all of those lessons arrive at a single destination: responsibility. Because none of those principles can fully transform your life until you decide they belong to you. No one else can keep your promises. No one else can protect your attention. No one else can build your habits or strengthen your character. That realization may seem heavy at first. In truth, it is incredibly freeing. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to change your circumstances, you discover that your next decision has always been within your control, and that decision is enough to begin changing your future. In the next chapter, you'll learn how seemingly insignificant victories create extraordinary momentum, and why the smallest wins often become the foundation for the biggest transformations. Chapter 10. Create momentum by winning the small moments. By now, you've probably noticed that lasting change rarely arrives all at once. It grows quietly, often without applause, through decisions so small they are easy to overlook. Yet these seemingly ordinary moments carry extraordinary influence because they determine the direction of everything that follows. Momentum doesn't begin with a major breakthrough. It begins with a single action that makes the next action slightly easier. Imagine pushing a large stone resting at the bottom of a hill. The first few pushes demand nearly all your strength. The stone barely moves, and it may even seem as though your effort is accomplishing nothing. Then, almost without noticing, it begins to roll. Each turn of the stone creates a little more movement, and the effort required to keep it going becomes less than the effort required to start. Personal growth follows the same pattern. The hardest part is rarely continuing. The hardest part is creating the first movement. This is why small wins matter far more than most people realize. A completed workout may strengthen your body, but it also strengthens your belief that you are someone who follows through. Finishing a difficult conversation doesn't only solve a problem, it builds confidence for the next difficult conversation. Saving a small amount of money today is not just about the amount itself. It reinforces the habit of thinking beyond the present moment. Each small victory creates evidence, and evidence is what transforms belief into certainty. Many people dismiss small achievements because they compare them to the size of their ultimate goal. Reading 10 pages doesn't seem impressive when you dream of writing a book. Spending 20 minutes practicing a skill feels insignificant when mastery still appears far away. But this comparison overlooks an important truth. Big accomplishments are almost never experienced all at once. They are assembled from hundreds of ordinary moments that, on their own, appear almost meaningless. Think about a bricklayer constructing a home. No visitor walks past the building site after one afternoon and says, "The house is finished." Yet every carefully placed brick matters. Remove enough of them, and the house never stands. Success works the same way. Today's effort may look small in isolation, but it becomes essential when viewed as part of a much larger structure. There's another reason small wins deserve your attention. They protect you from becoming discouraged by distance. When you focus only on the final destination, progress often feels painfully slow. But when you focus on today's next meaningful step, success becomes something you can experience immediately. You no longer need to wait months or years before feeling that you're moving forward. Every completed action becomes proof that progress is already happening. One helpful practice is to end each day by asking yourself a simple question: what promise did I keep today? The answer doesn't have to be dramatic. Perhaps you stayed focused for another 15 minutes. Perhaps you prepared tomorrow instead of leaving everything until morning. Perhaps you chose patience during a difficult conversation. These moments deserve recognition because they are quietly reinforcing the person you're becoming. Notice that this is different from seeking praise. External recognition comes and goes. Internal evidence remains. The more often you acknowledge your own consistency, the stronger your confidence becomes. Not because you're celebrating perfection, but because you're recognizing reliability. Over time, these small victories begin connecting together. One productive morning leads to a productive afternoon. One completed habit encourages another. One good decision makes the next one feel more natural. Momentum builds almost invisibly until your new standards begin replacing your old ones. This is how remarkable lives are usually created, not through one unforgettable day, but through thousands of ordinary days that were treated with extraordinary care. As we move into the final chapters of this audiobook, you'll discover that consistency isn't sustained by effort alone. The people around you, the environment you create, and the influences you allow into your life all play a powerful role in determining whether your momentum continues or slowly fades. In the next chapter, you'll learn how to build an environment that strengthens your commitment instead of quietly pulling you away from it. Chapter 11. Build an environment that pulls you forward. There is a simple truth that many people overlook. You are constantly being shaped by what surrounds you. Every room you spend time in, every conversation you repeat, every habit encouraged by your daily environment quietly influences the person you are becoming. Most of these influences are so familiar that you hardly notice them. Yet over months and years, they can either strengthen your commitment or slowly wear it away. Think about a boat sailing across the ocean. Even when the captain is highly skilled, the direction of the wind still matters. A favorable wind doesn't eliminate the need for effort, but it makes progress easier. A constant headwind doesn't make success impossible, but it demands far more energy for the same distance. Your environment works like that wind. If everything around you encourages distraction, unhealthy habits, or endless excuses, you'll spend much of your energy resisting those influences. But when your surroundings support your goals, consistency requires far less effort. This doesn't mean you must completely change your life overnight. It begins with noticing what is already shaping you. Imagine walking into two different workshops. In the first, tools are scattered across the floor, projects remain unfinished, nothing has a place, and every task begins with searching for what you need. In the second workshop, everything has been arranged with purpose. The tools are easy to find. The workspace invites action. The same carpenter would likely produce better work in the second room, not because their talent changed, but because the environment reduced unnecessary friction. Your daily life deserves the same thoughtful design. Ask yourself whether your surroundings encourage the person you're trying to become. Does your workspace invite focus or distraction? Do your daily routines make healthy decisions easier or more difficult? Do the people closest to you encourage growth, or do they constantly pull your attention toward habits you've been trying to leave behind? These questions aren't about judging others. They're about recognizing influence. One conversation can change your mood for an entire day. One encouraging friend can remind you of your potential when you've forgotten it yourself. Likewise, constant negativity can quietly convince you that your efforts are pointless before you've given them enough time to succeed. Think of a campfire. Place a glowing ember beside other burning pieces of wood, and the fire grows stronger. Remove that same ember and leave it alone in the cold, and eventually it loses its heat. Human beings are not so different. The people around you affect your standards more than your intentions often do. This doesn't mean everyone in your life must share your goals. Diversity of thought is valuable. but it does mean you should spend meaningful time with people whose actions remind you of the qualities you want to develop: integrity, discipline, curiosity, generosity, and perseverance. Another part of your environment is less obvious. It is the information you consume every day. Your mind becomes familiar with whatever you repeatedly feed it. If every spare moment is filled with noise, comparison, or endless distraction, your attention gradually begins reflecting those patterns. On the other hand, when you regularly expose yourself to thoughtful ideas, meaningful conversations, and purposeful learning, your thinking naturally begins expanding in the same direction. Guard your mental environment with the same care you guard your physical one. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every headline deserves your energy. Not every voice deserves influence over your decisions. Choose carefully what earns a place in your mind. There's another lesson worth remembering. Don't wait for your environment to become perfect before taking action. Some people delay progress because they believe they need the ideal office, the perfect schedule, or a completely supportive circle before they can succeed. But waiting for perfect conditions is simply another form of postponement. Build with what you have. Improve one corner of your environment today. Clear one distraction from your desk. Create one uninterrupted hour for meaningful work. Spend more time with one person who challenges you to grow. Small improvements to your surroundings often produce surprisingly large improvements in your behavior. By now, you've learned something powerful. Consistency is not created by determination alone. It is supported by the systems you build, the habits you repeat, the choices you make, and the environment that quietly surrounds those choices every day. When these elements begin working together instead of against each other, progress no longer feels like an uphill battle. It becomes your new normal. In the next chapter, you'll face one of the greatest tests of persistence, continuing when your efforts seem to produce no visible results. You'll discover why the most important stage of growth often happens long before success can be seen, and why those who keep going during that invisible season become the ones who eventually achieve extraordinary outcomes. Chapter 12. Keep going. When nothing seems to be changing, there is a stage in every meaningful pursuit that almost nobody talks about. It comes after the excitement of beginning has faded. You've built better habits. You've become more disciplined. You're keeping the promises you once broke so easily. Yet when you look around, your life doesn't seem dramatically different. The results are smaller than you expected. Progress feels slow. Doubt quietly returns, asking a dangerous question. What if none of this is working? This is the point where many people abandon years of potential, not because they made the wrong choices, not because they lacked ability. They quit because they mistook invisible progress for no progress at all. The human mind is naturally drawn to immediate rewards. We enjoy seeing instant results because they reassure us that our effort matters. But many of the most valuable changes in life refuse to follow that timeline. They develop quietly beneath the surface, long before they become visible to anyone else. Imagine an old stone bridge stretching across a river. Every day, thousands of tiny drops of water strike the same sections of rock. No single drop appears powerful enough to make a difference. If you stood beside the bridge for an hour, you might conclude the water was accomplishing nothing. Return years later, however, and you'll notice something remarkable. The stone has changed. Not because of one dramatic impact, but because of countless small moments that seemed insignificant on their own. Your daily actions leave the same kind of mark on your character. One disciplined morning doesn't transform your life. One focused work session doesn't create mastery. One difficult conversation doesn't permanently strengthen a relationship. Yet each one leaves a trace. Over time, those traces become patterns. Patterns become habits. Habits become character. And character quietly shapes your future. One reason people become discouraged during this stage is that they compare their private effort with someone else's visible success. You see the finished building. You don't see the years spent pouring the foundation. You notice the confident speaker. You don't see the hundreds of awkward presentations that came before. You admire the successful entrepreneur. You rarely witness the failed ideas, uncertain decisions, and ordinary mornings that made that success possible. Comparison creates a distorted picture because it often compares your beginning to someone else's middle. Imagine watching the final 10 minutes of a marathon. The runners crossing the finish line appear strong, determined, and confident. But if you judged the race only by those final moments, you'd miss everything that truly mattered. The early miles, the moments of fatigue, the temptation to stop, and the countless decisions to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Success always has a longer story than it first appears. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is active trust. It is the willingness to continue investing in actions whose rewards have not yet fully arrived. Think of a watchmaker assembling a mechanical clock. Hundreds of tiny gears are carefully placed inside a case. Individually, none of them seems impressive. Some appear almost too small to matter, yet remove just one gear and the entire mechanism fails. Progress often works in the same quiet way. Many of the actions that feel too small to matter are actually holding your future together. Reading another chapter, practicing one more skill, saving another small amount, keeping one more promise, choosing one more disciplined response instead of an emotional reaction. These moments rarely receive applause. They receive something far more valuable: accumulation. Another challenge during this stage is boredom. Not the dramatic kind, the ordinary kind, the kind that appears when your routine becomes familiar. At first, new habits feel exciting because they represent change. Eventually, they become normal. Ironically, that's often a sign you've grown, yet many people mistake that familiarity for stagnation. Imagine a professional violinist practicing scales. To an observer, the exercise may appear repetitive. Surely someone with years of experience no longer needs such basic practice. But the musician understands something deeper. Mastery is maintained through ordinary repetitions, not because they are exciting, because they are essential. The people who remain consistent stop asking whether every day feels inspiring. Instead, they ask whether today's actions remain aligned with the person they have chosen to become. That question protects them from one of the greatest dangers in personal growth: confusing novelty with progress. Many people constantly search for a new system, a new routine, a new strategy, or a new source of motivation. What they truly need is not another beginning. They need a longer commitment. There is tremendous power in staying with what already works long enough for its results to compound. Trees do not grow taller by being replanted every season. They grow because their roots remain in one place. Your goals deserve the same stability. Another perspective can help during seasons when results seem invisible. Instead of measuring only external achievements, begin measuring internal changes. Ask yourself, do I recover from setbacks more quickly than I used to? Do I make decisions with greater confidence? Have my daily habits become more consistent? Do I keep more promises to myself than I did 6 months ago? Am I less controlled by temporary emotions? These victories matter because they often appear long before visible success does. In fact, they make visible success possible. Without them, any achievement would be difficult to sustain. This is why your identity has become the central theme of this audiobook. You're no longer simply trying to accomplish goals. You're becoming someone capable of sustaining them. That transformation cannot always be measured with numbers. It is measured in the quiet confidence that comes from repeatedly honoring your commitments. It is measured in your response when life becomes difficult. It is measured in the way you return after setbacks instead of disappearing. Those changes may not attract attention today. One day, however, people will notice the results. They'll see the confidence, the consistency, the discipline, the resilience. What they won't see are the hundreds of ordinary days that created those qualities. But you'll know. You'll remember the mornings when nothing seemed different, the evenings when progress felt invisible, the moments when quitting appeared reasonable, and the quiet decision to continue anyway. That decision is what separates temporary effort from lasting transformation. As we approach the final stage of this audiobook, one lesson remains. Consistency is powerful. Discipline is essential, but neither can endure without resilience. In the next chapter, you'll learn how to develop a mindset that not only survives life's inevitable storms, but grows stronger because of them. You'll discover how people who never quit stop fearing adversity and begin using it as proof that they are becoming exactly who they set out to be. Chapter 13. Become stronger than the challenges you face. There comes a point in every transformation when life asks a question that no plan, habit, or routine can answer for you. The question is simple. Who are you when things stop going your way? Anyone can remain committed when progress is visible, routines are uninterrupted, and confidence is high. But resilience is revealed under very different conditions. It appears when uncertainty replaces certainty, when effort seems unnoticed, and when the future becomes difficult to predict. Those moments don't create your character, they uncover it. Think about a bridge stretching across a deep canyon. Engineers don't measure its strength on calm, sunny afternoons. They measure it during heavy winds, violent storms, and the constant pressure of thousands of crossings. The bridge proves its reliability not because difficult conditions never arrive, but because it continues standing when they do. Your character is tested in the same way. The purpose of resilience is not to help you avoid hardship. Its purpose is to help you remain steady while moving through it. Many people imagine resilience as an extraordinary quality possessed by a fortunate few. They assume some individuals are simply born mentally tougher than others. But resilience rarely begins as confidence. It begins as repetition. Every time you recover after disappointment, you strengthen it. Every time you continue after a difficult day, you strengthen it. Every time you choose your values over your emotions, you strengthen it. Resilience is less like a gift and more like a muscle. It grows through repeated use, not comfortable conditions. Imagine climbing a mountain wrapped in thick fog. You cannot see the summit. Sometimes you cannot even see the next bend in the trail. If your motivation depends on seeing the entire path, you'll eventually stop walking. But experienced climbers understand something different. They don't need to see the whole mountain. They only need enough visibility to take the next careful step. Life often asks for the same kind of trust. There will be seasons when you won't know exactly how everything will unfold. You'll make decisions without guarantees. You'll continue working without immediate certainty that your efforts will succeed. In those moments, resilience is not believing everything will go perfectly. It is believing you can handle whatever happens next. That belief changes your relationship with uncertainty. Instead of treating uncertainty as a threat, you begin seeing it as the natural price of meaningful growth. There's another quality that quietly supports resilience: flexibility. People sometimes confuse persistence with stubbornness, but they are not the same. Persistence means refusing to abandon your purpose. Stubbornness means refusing to adjust your methods. Imagine a river making its way toward the sea. When it encounters a large rock, it doesn't stop flowing. It doesn't spend years fighting the obstacle head-on. It bends, finds another route, and continues moving in the same direction. Its destination never changes. Its path does. That is resilience in action. When one strategy fails, you learn. When circumstances change, you adapt. When one opportunity closes, you remain open to another. The goal remains steady, even while your methods evolve. This ability to adapt without abandoning your purpose is one of the greatest strengths you can develop. Another challenge appears when life becomes emotionally heavy. Perhaps you lose confidence. Perhaps someone criticizes your work. Perhaps a season of disappointment lasts longer than expected. In moments like these, the temptation is to define yourself by your current emotions. I feel discouraged, so maybe I'm not capable. I feel uncertain, so maybe I'm making the wrong choice. But emotions describe a moment. They do not define a person. Imagine looking at the sky during a storm. Dark clouds may completely cover the sun. For a while, it appears as though the sunlight has disappeared. Yet you know something important. The sun hasn't gone anywhere. It has simply been hidden by temporary conditions. Your confidence often works the same way. There will be days when it feels distant, days when doubt speaks louder than certainty, days when progress seems impossible to notice. Those moments are real. They are simply not permanent. If you continue honoring your principles during those seasons, confidence has a remarkable way of returning, not because you waited for it, but because your actions gave it a reason to return. One of the strongest habits resilient people develop is refusing to make permanent decisions during temporary emotional storms. When frustration is high, they wait before giving up. When disappointment is fresh, they avoid dramatic conclusions. When exhaustion appears, they choose rest instead of surrender. That distinction matters. Rest renews commitment. Quitting abandons it. Learning to recognize the difference can change the direction of your life. There's another practice worth carrying forward. When something difficult happens, resist the urge to immediately ask, "Why me?" Instead, ask, "What strength is this experience asking me to develop?" Every challenge makes a different request. Some ask for patience, some ask for courage, some ask for humility, some ask for better preparation, others ask for the willingness to begin again. Whatever the lesson, hardship becomes far more valuable when you allow it to shape your character instead of hardening your heart. Look back over everything you've experienced throughout this audiobook. You learned to choose commitment before confidence. You built habits capable of surviving ordinary life. You reshaped your identity through repeated action. You defeated procrastination by beginning before you felt ready. You embraced discomfort instead of escaping it. You built discipline through systems rather than willpower. You turned setbacks into lessons. You protected your attention. You accepted responsibility for your choices. You discovered the quiet power of small victories. You shaped an environment that supports growth. You learned to trust invisible progress. Each chapter has been preparing you for this moment, because resilience is not one separate skill. It is the result of all the others working together. Commitment keeps you moving, habits keep you steady, identity keeps you grounded, discipline keeps you consistent, ownership keeps you accountable, patience keeps you hopeful. Together, they create someone who cannot be easily shaken by temporary circumstances, not because life becomes easier, but because that person has become stronger. And that brings us to the final chapter. The destination was never simply reaching a goal. It was becoming someone who no longer needs to rely on motivation to keep moving. Someone who no longer measures success by occasional bursts of effort. Someone whose consistency has become part of their character. In the final chapter, you'll discover what it truly means to live as the person who never quits, not for a week, not for a season, but as a lifelong way of thinking, choosing, and living. Chapter 14. Live like the person who never quits. If you've stayed with this audiobook to this point, something important has already happened. You may not notice it immediately, and no dramatic announcement will mark the occasion, but the way you think has begun to change. At the beginning, consistency may have seemed like something you needed to force. Now, you can see it for what it truly is, a reflection of the choices you make every single day. This final chapter is not about learning another strategy. It is about deciding how you will live once this audiobook ends. Many people treat personal growth as a temporary project. They commit to a new routine for a few weeks, complete a challenge, or reach a specific goal, and then slowly drift back toward old habits. They assume the finish line is the end of the work, but real transformation has no finish line. Imagine a lighthouse standing along a rugged coastline. It doesn't shine only when ships are nearby. It doesn't stop working because the sea is calm. Its purpose remains constant, day after day, season after season. The lighthouse isn't reacting to circumstances. It is simply living according to its purpose. There is a lesson in that image. The person who never quits does not wake up each morning asking whether discipline is necessary today. They don't negotiate with every responsibility or wait for perfect emotional conditions before honoring a commitment. Their actions are guided by principles that remain steady, even when life does not. Throughout this audiobook, you've learned that commitment is stronger than motivation, habits are stronger than intention, identity is stronger than temporary emotion, and resilience is stronger than setbacks. None of those ideas matter, however, unless they become part of the way you approach ordinary life. The ordinary moments are where your future is quietly written. The alarm clock ringing before sunrise, the decision to finish one more page, the conversation you choose to have instead of avoiding, the promise you keep when nobody else knows it exists. These moments may never become memorable stories, but together they create the foundation of a remarkable life. There will still be difficult seasons. There will be mornings when your energy feels low, weeks when progress appears slow, unexpected changes that force you to adjust your plans. None of those experiences mean you've failed. They simply remind you that consistency is not about maintaining perfect performance. It is about returning to your values again and again, regardless of how many times life interrupts your rhythm. Think of a compass carried by an experienced traveler. Storms may force the traveler to change direction temporarily. Mountains may require a different route. Rivers may slow the journey. Yet each time the traveler checks the compass, the destination becomes clear again. Your principles should serve the same purpose. When life becomes confusing, return to them. Keep your word, take the next meaningful step, protect your attention, accept responsibility, choose growth over comfort, continue before confidence arrives. Those principles are more dependable than emotion because they remain available every single day. Perhaps the greatest reward of living this way is not achieving more. It is becoming someone you trust. There is a quiet confidence that grows when your actions consistently match your intentions. You stop making promises you don't expect yourself to keep. You stop depending on motivation to rescue your progress. You begin facing challenges with a calmer mind because you've already proven many times over that difficult moments do not define your future. That confidence cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed from someone else's success. It is earned through repeated acts of integrity that often go unnoticed by everyone except you. One day, people may ask how you became so disciplined, so focused, or so resilient. They may assume you discovered a secret. The truth will be much simpler. You kept choosing the next right action, not once, not occasionally, but often enough that it became part of who you are. And that's the real destination of this audiobook. Not a perfect life, not a life without setbacks, not endless motivation, a life built on dependable character. A life where your decisions reflect your values instead of your moods. A life where quitting is no longer your first response to difficulty because continuing has become your natural habit. As you close this chapter, remember that nothing truly changes because of the words you've heard. Everything changes because of the choices you make after hearing them. The next decision is yours. Take it with purpose. Take it with courage. And above all, keep moving forward, one honest choice, one meaningful action, and one ordinary day at a time, because that is how an ordinary person becomes someone who never quits. And now, the story you've been listening to becomes the life you choose to live. Conclusion. As this audiobook comes to an end, it's worth remembering that the greatest transformations rarely begin with dramatic moments. More often, they begin with a quiet decision, a decision that no one else sees, applauds, or even knows about. It is the decision to become a little more consistent today than you were yesterday. Everything you've explored throughout these chapters points back to that single truth. You discovered that motivation is unpredictable, but commitment can be chosen. You learned that habits are not chains that restrict your freedom, but pathways that protect your future. You saw how identity grows through repeated actions, how procrastination loses its power when you begin before you feel ready, and how discomfort often signals growth rather than danger. You learned to build systems instead of depending on willpower, to treat setbacks as lessons instead of verdicts, to guard your attention, accept responsibility, celebrate small victories, shape an environment that supports your goals, trust the power of invisible progress, and develop resilience that remains steady through life's inevitable challenges. None of these lessons were designed to help you become perfect. They were designed to help you become dependable. There is a profound difference between those two ideas. Perfection demands that you never stumble. Dependability simply asks that you keep returning to the path whenever you do. That is a standard any determined person can live by. As you move forward, don't measure your life only by the size of your achievements. Measure it by the quality of your daily choices. Ask yourself whether your actions reflect the person you are committed to becoming. Every promise you keep strengthens your self-respect. Every distraction you resist protects your future. Every difficult step you willingly take expands your capacity for the next challenge. Years from now, the life you build will not be the result of one extraordinary decision. It will be the natural outcome of thousands of ordinary decisions made with intention, patience, and integrity. Those decisions will shape your character long before they shape your circumstances, and in time, your circumstances will begin reflecting the person you've become. So don't wait for another perfect moment to begin again. Don't wait until you feel fearless, fully prepared, or completely confident. Start with the next meaningful action in front of you. Honor it. Then honor the one that follows. One day, you'll look back and realize that the life you once hoped for wasn't created through luck, talent, or fleeting motivation. It was built through consistency. It was sustained through resilience. And it became possible because you made a simple choice over and over again to keep showing up. That is the lasting power of perseverance. That is the quiet strength of discipline. And that is how an ordinary day becomes an extraordinary life.